Arizona John by Charles Godfrey Leland. Read for LibriVox.org by Greg Giordano. Newport Richey, Florida. When in a situation, it always pays the best to have your wits about you, for it helps the interest. And a man gets so encouraged by succeedin' when he tries, that the more you crowd him downward, the more he's bound to rise. As when near Tres Alamos, while workin' at his mine, John Lyons, late of Tombstone, without the least design to involve himself whatever in any kind of tricks, got inside an unprovided in a most unpleasant fix. John Lyons, late of Tombstone, had but just put in a blast, when he saw 4 buck Apaches approximatin' fast upon their headlong horses in a rack-a-loose career, and every one preceded by a long projectin' spear. He had planted all the powder, and was just atop the shaft, while the foemen kept a-comin' like as they was telegraphed. To run was to be taken, and to stay was to be slew, and in such a situation, how, whatever, could he do? Being quick upon the trigger, Lyons did not stop to choose, for a match was in his fingers, so he lighted up the fuse, and dropped behind a boulder, for disabuse their aim, when at him like a sheriff's writ full dig the Injuns came. He had timed the fuse so nicely that the 'Paches reached the rock exactly at the nick of the explosionary shock. Bang! How the big rock busted as the powder gave a flare, while a rain of stones and gravel went a-thunderin' through the air. It was 4 red Apaches who also had a rise, and started for the hunting grounds on horseback through the skies. Whereas if they had the notion, but recalled it there and then, for they speedily descended as 4 non-existent men. John Lyons, late of Tombstone, just down behind his rock, escaped the influential effect of such a shock, and examinin' the prospect, he very plainly sees he has worked the blast quite perfect, likewise slammed his enemies. When narratin' the adventure which I've chanted in my song, if he terms them blasted Injuns, no one calls his language strong, for their hopes were surely blasted, which they fondly reckoned on, and with patent giant powder, by this Arizona John. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
The Ballad of Charity by Charles Godfrey Leland. Read for LibriVox.org by Shama Abbasi. It was in a pleasant depot sequestered from the rain that many weary passengers were waiting for the train. Piles of quite expensive baggage, many a gorgeous portmanteau, ivory-handled umbrellas made a most touristic show, whereunto there came a person, very humble was his mien, who took an observation of the interesting scene, closely scanned the umbrellas, watched with joy the mighty trunks, and observed that the people were securing Pullman bunks, who was followed shortly after by a most unhappy tramp, upon whose features poverty had jounced her iron stamp, and to make a clear impression, as bees sting you while they buzz, she had hit him rather hard than she generally does, for he was so awful ragged and in parts so awful bare, that the folks were quite repulsioned to behold him begging there, and instead of drawing currency from out their pocket-books, they drew themselves asunder with aversionary looks, sternly gazed the first newcomer on the unindulgent crowd, then in tones which pierced the depot he soliloquized aloud. I have travelled o'er the continent from Quebec to Bogota, but such a set of scalawags as these I never saw. Ye are wealthy, ye are gifted, have house and lands and rent, yet unto a suffering mortal ye will not donate a cent. Ye expend your missionaries to the heathen and the Jew, but there isn't any heathen that is half as small as you. You're lucky, ye have cheque books and deposits in the bank, and ye squandered your money on the titled folks of rank. The onyx and the sardonyx upon your garments shine, and ye drink at every dinner perhaps $1's worth the fine. Ye are going for the summer to the islands by the sea, where it costs $4 daily. Such is not for such as me. Ivory-handled umbrellas do not come into my plan, but I can give $1 to the suffering fellow-man. Handbags made of rushy leather are not truly at my call, yet in the eyes of Mussy I'm richer than you all. For I can give $1 where you dare not stand a dime, and never miss it nother, nor regret it any time. Saying this, he drew a wallet from the inner of his vest, and gave the tramp a daddy, which it was his level best. Other people, having heard him, soon to charity inclined. One giver soon makes 20 if you only get their wind. The first who gave the $1 led the other one about, and at every contribution he raised a joyful shout, exclaiming how 'twas noble to relievate distress, and remarking that our duty is our present happiness. $30 altogether were collected by the tramp, when he bid 'em all good evening and went out into the damp, and was followed briefly after by the one who made the speech, and who showed by good example how to practise as to preach, which soon around the corner the couple quickly met, and the tramp produced the specie for to liquidate his debt, and the man who did the preachin' took his 20 of the sum, which you see that out of the 30 left a tenner for the bum. And the couple passed the summer at Bar Harbor with the rest, greatly changed in their appearance, most elegantly dressed. Any fowl with change of feathers may a brilliant bird become. Oh, how hard is life for many! Oh, how sweet it is for some! End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Multum in Parvo by Charles Godfrey Leland. Read for LibriVox.org by Todd. Great thoughts are oft expressed in fewest words, and I remember how long years ago, when a great lady in her diary of a short visit to the Scottish land recorded of a sorrowful event: "To day poor little Vicky, by mischance, sat on a wasp's nest." All the newspapers declared it was a perfect masterpiece of excellent conciseness. Yet I think it was outdone by a Red Indian, one of the Quoddy tribe, who did the same, since he, like little Vicky, also sat upon a seat as hot, and when he rose, briefly exclaimed in his vernacular, "Hylam ki coo," and being asked what this might mean, responded in the English tongue, "Heap hell." O reader, if the soul of wit be brevity, this Indian was there. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. The Organist of Bergamo by Charles Godfrey Leland. Read for LibriVox.org by Todd. For blowing is not playing on the flute. To do that well, you must put fingers to it. German proverb. This is a merry tale of Bergamo. It chanced in 1528, as I do find the fact recorded in a pleasing book of 1636, entitled Scelta di Faceti, a little yellow, quaint, italic tome, which looks as if it were behind the age, and would have been black letter if it could. That in fair Venice raged a pestilence, whereof in time full many people died, and among those a trusty servitor who blew the bellows for the organist all in the great cathedral of Saint Mark, whose billowy pavement truly seems to roll in time and measure with the music sweet, so perfect were the harmonies of art which men imagined in the olden time. Now as this man had died while at his work, even while blowing a Magnificat all in the Holy Church, it was adjudged that he almost deserved to be a saint, and he who preached the sermon over him said that his soul had risen on the notes of the grand anthem which he had inspired, and having reached the music all divine, had softly sunk, as light is lost in light, into the pure celestial. There he stopped. Men were great preachers in the olden time. It happened that a certain Giannolo, Facino Bergamasco, or a man from Bergamo, a porter by his trade, who carried heavy burdens, yet withal was not o'erburdened with a load of wit, hearing this sermon, got it in his head, and no great wonder either, that the late departed bellows blower must have been the chief musician of the Holy House; and knowing that the man who bloweth up a pair of bagpipes also is the one who plays upon the same, drew inference that the deceased was the true organist, and he who played thereon his humble aid, who only worked to keep the tune in time. Now being smitten with a deep desire to rise in life, and also to be called a child of art, with a nice salary, and have a sermon preached o'er him when dead, Giannolo unto the bishop went, and made a great entreaty to be placed among the holy followers of Saint Mark, and that the aim of his ambition was alzare I mantici quando suonava gli organi, that's to say, to lift the bellows when the organ played; and as he was a stout and lusty knave, who might be useful in 100 ways, they gladly took him on, so there he stayed, blowing the bellows faithfully in time. I ween there is not in all Italy a man, unless he came from Bergamo, who could have blown an organ 7 years, in the full faith that he was playing it, and was indeed the real organist. Yet this, in fact, unless the legend lies, was what befell Giannolo. By this time, having laid by a very handsome sum, and being well attired, though modestly as is becoming to a son of art, he went a visiting his native place, where all who were related unto him, that is to say about 1/2 the town, did greatly marvel at his handsome clothes, and at his air of stately dignity; but most of all when he informed them that he was no more a porter, he had felt immortal longings in him to arise above that vulgar calling, and to soar, mid palpitations sweet and pleasures soft, the manifestations of that beauteous life diffused unseen throughout eternal space, which men call music; and that he had risen even to a monthly salary of 10 francs, wherewith were many pleasing perquisites, and that he played the organ in Saint Mark's, as all the world allowed, in perfect time. Up rose a buzz of strangest wonderment, or, 'tis writ, di che restarono più maravigliati, for they all were such amazed that such a common man, si vil e si rozzo, such a boor, had risen to the pinnacle of art in Venice, where all art was at its height, and gained the crown of glory, Iddio! 10 francs a month beside the perquisites. They bowed before him with deep reverence, hoping he'd stay with them a little time. Then some one spoke with hesitating tone, as if in fear to take a liberty, and said, "Your Excellence, if we may dare, since we would celebrate the kind return of such an honour to our noble town, would you not grace the occasion, and increase our joy and sense of deep respectfulness, by playing vespers for us in the Dome on Sunday next?" Giannolo bowed low, and in a speech adorned with many flowers, which he had culled from sermons in Saint Mark, acceded gracefully to their request, and said he would be there to play, in time. When Sunday came, there came with it a crowd, such as Bergamo never saw before, for in her streets and past her palaces thousands in holiday attire swept on, and even from afar there was a thundering roar, from time to time, which rolled from square to square, as when the incoming ocean with a tide, urged by a tempest, breaks upon the rocks. Yea, there were many, tanto popolo, all that the church would hold, and then outside, a vast, impatient, brilliant multitude, such as had ne'er been there at any time. And at the appointed hour Giannolo came, rising before the people in his state, waiting awhile the appearance of the man who was to play the organ while he blew. And all the congregation waited too, all staring steadily at the great man in anxious expectation, till at last Giannolo from the pulpit cried aloud, "Where is the man who is to touch the keys? What is the use of making music, hey, and filling up the thing with melody, as I have come to do, unless there be someone to click the bones and let it out? You don't suppose that I can raise the wind, and steer, and sail the ship as well, my friends? Such things were ne'er beheld at any time." There was an instant's silence, deep and strange. In all the great cathedral rang no sound. All stared at one another open-eyed, or at Giannolo, just as if some power before unknown in life had seized on them with a tremendous sense of dire amaze, not knowing what the devil it could mean, when all at once they took, and from them all there rose a roar of laughter like a crash of thunder, and so near it that one seemed to miss the lightning, or as I might say, 'twas like a flash of sound, and then again it came re-echoed from the multitude gathered outside, as the electric peal resounds, repeated by the mountain tops, yea, such a peal of laughter as the book declares, at vespers ne'er was heard before, and ne'er again will be at any time. Moral. I pray you to think upon it well. There are full many people in this world who think that they are wondrous wise in art, and who, as critics, write about the same in transcendental phrase with capitals, and call it faith, and love, and heaven knows what, and cannot think of it without a gasp, and uttering phrases silly, mystical; because they are the empty windy ones, inflating and inflated, who but blow the bellows of the organ, yet believe that they are leaders in the realm of art. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. The Goth and the Pigeon, by Charles Godfrey Leland. Read for LibriVox.org by Todd. Among the merry tales of olden time, which are still current in fair Italy, are many told in taverns or in type about the rude barbarians of the north, who crossed the Alps, even as they did of yore when they invaded fertile Lombardy, and helped themselves to all which pleased their eyes, and paid for it in iron and with blood. Those times are fled, but Northmen still are here. States fall, arts fade, but English yet abound, and Austrian Germans and Americans stalk proudly through the streets with Baedeker, or Murray, with the very gait and air of their barbarian ancestors, although they are cleaner washed, and more completely shaved. Bet high upon the latter, for as once they came to rob the natives of their goods, the latter now do live by spoiling them. And thus strange things do happen in this world. Thus we may note that all these foreigners, be it the daintiest English dame alive, or damsel born in fair America, or Russians of a royal family, or Frenchmen of the very noblest stock, or Viennese as elegant and feche as even Viennese can be produced, wherein they well nigh rival Baltimore, and are still regarded by the Italian with a doubtful smile, who as he smiles exclaims, "Sono forestieri," which indeed means they are foreigners. And yet the word comes from foresto, savage, desert, wild. And so do ancient thorns live round the rose, and thus strange things do happen in the world. Now it befell that in the Lombard time, when Diederik Theodoric was king, and from Ravenna ruled all Italy, the court religion was in the Arian, to which men nowadays a unit add, yet do not add by that process, that I see, aught to its value. But the odd result was that the Gothic warriors nothing knew about the mystery of the Trinity. Nay, they were even far more ignorant than was the English curate, who when asked what he did understand by the Holy Ghost, replied, "I am not sure, but I believe it is a kind of pigeon." These poor Goths had never learned so much as this youth knew, and thus strange things do happen in the world. Now it befell that once a Visigoth, stately, while all unconscious of his state, and proud while nothing thinking of his pride, went stalking onward through the streets of Rome, unheeding all the casual passers by who turned to look at him, as a grave bull might walk through many sheep, or as my Lord Guy de Plantagenet just now walked by before my window, where I writing sit in Florence. True, he came bien a propos, and thus strange things do happen in this world. Well, then, this fierce barbarian from the north, who, as I said, was densely ignorant of Trinitarian theology, was not much further in the Italian tongue, seeing that that which he essayed to speak was of the pidgin kind. Oh, marvel strange! Oh, wondrous miracle! Lo, how the Muse brings up that word to keep me to my tale. Ah, what strange things do happen in this world! Now as he strode along the Roman street, with thoughts of dinner flitting through his soul, lifting his eyes he saw above a sign the picture of a dove with outstretched wings, above the door of a trattoria, which means a place where you can treat yourself to what you want, that is, a restaurant. And beneath the bird he read inscribed in gold, Spirito Santo, and he gazed at it, and took an object lesson, and exclaimed, "So that is the Italian for a dove! I must remember it." So in he went, repeating ever to himself the words, Spirito Santo, Santo Spirito. Those who overheard him deemed him a devout and fervid follower of the Trinity. And thus strange things do happen in the world. And having sat him down, the waiter came and asked his Excellence what he would have, to which his Gothic Excellence replied, "I want a bottle of your noblest wine, with it a soup of highest quality, and after that a roast San Spiritu." "A roasted what, señor?" cried the man, as one who had not rightly understood, while all the guests around did glare amazed. "I said," resumed the northern warrior, "a Spirito Santo, such as you have got upon your sign outside, a bird, you know, that moves its wings like this," and here he moved his bended arms like wings, both up and down, while with his voice he murmured coo, or what is called in French a roucoulement, or garran in the German. Hearing this, all who were present promptly understood, and though they all were naturally polite, and never laughed at any foreigner before his face because he erred in words, this was too much, and all burst out in a tremendous, a Homeric roar. They drew the line at pigeons, and the Goth, when 'twas explained, laughed loudest of them all. And thus it was he learned another word. And thus strange things do happen in the world. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Reflections in a Printing Office by Charles Godfrey Leland. Read for LibriVox.org by Larry Wilson. Faust means a fist. A fist can hit, I ween. Faust made the greatest hit that e'er was seen. I know not if 'twas Gutenberg or Faust who first began to print. The honor was too great for any single man. Printing is called the art of arts, and typos are the artists, right. They are the nobler counterparts of those who work in black and white. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain. End of Songs of Sea and Lays of the Land by Charles Godfrey Leland.